You probably won't be surprised to hear that this past year was the worst on record for gun violence in schools, according to data from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. And new numbers from the CDC show gun deaths across the U.S. have reached the highest levels since the organization started tracking 40 years ago. In 2018 alone, there were more than 300 mass shootings in which 3 or more people were killed. Among them, and you can recite them with me, Thousand Oaks bar shooting, 12 people murdered. The Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, in which 11 worshipers were killed. The shooting at the Capital Gazette newspaper office, 5 staffers died. Santa Fe, Texas high school shooting, 10 people were killed. And of course, the Parkland, Florida school shooting, where 17 students and teachers were murdered, after which survivors vowed to make their voices heard, hosting, as you recall, a nationwide March for Our Lives, protesting gun violence, and giving rise to teens who've since become household names, like Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg.
I say we will not stop until every man, every woman, every child, and every American can live without fear of gun violence. And to that I say, no more.
No one could comprehend the devastating aftermath or how far this would reach or where this would go. For those who still can't comprehend because they refuse to, I'll tell you where it went. Right into the ground, 6 feet deep.
I want to ask you all three what impact these kids have had on gun policy in this country. But first, I want to play one more tape of a woman that was elected to Congress from the district that put Newt Gingrich there, whose son Jordan was the victim of gun violence. Here's Congresswoman-elect Lucy McBath.
After Parkland, I was compelled to enter this race for Congress to provide leadership that would be about the business of putting lives over profit.
What kind of scorecard do you give this, I hate it sounds cheap, this lobbying effort that was led by these kids? Most of them couldn't even vote. How did they do?
Pretty well, I think. You know, Columbine is 20 years ago, Newtown a decade ago. People get angry and it's not sustainable, but these kids have started something that has affected our last elections and I think will keep going. They've incorporated the not-for-profits, they're franchising their movement, and it's grabbing a lot of attention. Ayanna
Pressley is quoted in the New York Times, not quoted, but there's reporting in the New York Times, one of the reasons she agreed to vote for Nancy Pelosi was a commitment not only to put her on some gun violence subcommittee, but that Nancy Pelosi agreed to bring up a vote early on in her speakership on background checks. But I'm not at all belittling that. That's really important. There's still a Senate with, 53 Republicans. There's still a president who took on the NRA, and now he's back with the NRA. Is anything really going to happen?
I don't know. I think, one, the powerful voice that Ayanna brings to Congress. She's a powerful presenter, speaker. She knows the substance of the issues. One vote, but it's about mobilizing. It's about organizing within that body. I think of 1963 and the Civil Rights Movement and the kids who marched on downtown Birmingham and the impact they had on raising the consciousness of the nation. And I see that when we think about those young people around gun violence.
Did anything change with that thing? I mean, well, a lot of the NRA people like to say, well, sure, Democrats who we gave Fs to did win in liberal places like California. Mm-hmm. They don't like to say that Democrats who had F ratings in places like Kansas and South Carolina also won their races. So did those kids begin to change the debate in this country? Why do you say no?
I think, sadly, the reason that the movement has picked up so much momentum is because the shootings have continued since Parkland. I don't think the kids, I think the kids were a blip on the radar. I think they were a flash in the pan. I think
But you said the movement has picked up steam. Put aside the impact of these teenagers.
I think the movement has picked up steam because the shootings have continued. The real question, in my view, is how do we keep schools and public places safe? And that is a very different question than just saying, do we need to get rid of guns?
Well, the commission that's headed by Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, came out in the last 24 hours saying, hey, violence in schools, forget guns, really has nothing to, it's almost like a Saturday Night Live skit as far as I'm concerned. So when you say the movement's picked up steam, does anybody expect anything concrete? I understand you say maybe the culture is changing. Anything concrete?
I mean, if we think about the fact that there's a criminal justice reform bill that's moving now in the Senate. Bipartisan. It gives me hope. I think it takes time, and unfortunately, this is an issue. I think many Republicans, I believe, many Democrats believe there needs to be something done around gun control. But yet,
Donald Trump for a day did too, by the way, in that meeting in the White House.
But we're fighting not necessarily over that issue, but it's the broader fight between the parties that's tying up this issue. And I believe that at some point there has to be, the truth has to prevail that we have to do something about gun violence.
Well, I got to be brief here, but most Democrats are shying away from the I word, impeachment. Saying, no, well, let's wait for Mueller, let's see what happens. Are they going to do the same thing on guns? Because guns continue to be, maybe not background checks, but a polarizing issue in many pockets of the country where they need to do well in 2020.
No, I think they're going to address it. You've got a House that's committed to looking at it. I think these kids are going to be around for a while. This is a time period where the new generation is taking over. The torch is being passed, and I can see it in guns. I can see it in a lot of areas that I think we're going to see some changes come 2019, 2020.